The Dao that can be spoken is not the eternal Dao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. These are the opening lines from Laozi's Dao De Jing. They reveal the profound mysteries of the world and remind us that the true Dao cannot be fully expressed in words. Have you ever wondered, what exactly is the Dao? What kind of wisdom does this ancient, great philosopher and thinker, Laozi, bring to us? Laozi, also known as Lier, born around 571 BC, was the founder of Taoism. His philosophy has shaped Chinese culture and thought for thousands of years. In the Dao De Jing, a text of only 5,000 characters, Laozi uses simple yet profound language to reveal the nature of all things and the laws of the universe. For example, he says, being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy complete each other. Long and short contrast each other. High and low rely on each other. In just a few words, Laozi presents a dialectical view of the world, showing that opposites are interdependent. But was Laozi merely a scholar? Far from it, his philosophy extended beyond the written word. He advocated for wu-wei non-action, or governing by letting things follow their natural course. As he said, heaven and earth are not benevolent. They treat all things as straw dogs. The sage is not benevolent. He treats the people as straw dogs. Both heaven and the sage act in accordance with natural laws, without selfish desires. In this video series, we will delve into the philosophical world of Laozi, exploring each chapter of the Dao De Jing to understand the timeless wisdom contained within. Whether you are seeking direction in life or searching for inner peace, Laozi's teachings will surely offer you profound insights. Let us begin this journey together, starting with the remarkable life of Laozi, as we step into the boundless depths of the Dao De Jing. What exactly is the Dao? Are there things in life that are hard to put into words? At certain moments in life, there seems to be an invisible force that permeates everything, yet cannot be accurately described in language. But does this unspeakable force truly exist? Dao De Jing is a classic text that discusses the way of heaven and the way of humanity. It uses concise yet profound language to reveal the essence of the world. In this ancient book of wisdom, Laozi addresses the truths that appear inexpressible. Today, we will discuss this topic. The unspeakable does not mean it doesn't exist. There are many things we cannot explain clearly or are simply beyond words. But does that mean such things do not exist? If we try to understand the Daoist concept of Dao, we will find that the Dao is something that cannot be spoken of. But that does not mean it doesn't exist. This is what we learn from the first chapter of Dao De Jing. Now, let's begin to delve into Laozi's Dao De Jing. The first chapter presents a significant challenge. I will first recite the original text of this chapter and then give a general explanation. When reading, some of the phrasing and punctuation may differ from what is commonly seen or heard. Let me clarify that my reference is based on the Wang by Commentary edition, supplemented by the Han Dynasty Silk Manuscript's Bushu version. After conducting considerable research, I made revisions to the original text. You will notice the differences in phrasing and punctuation after I read the original text. Let me recite the original text of the first chapter of Laozi. The Dao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Dao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of all things. The named is the mother of all things. Therefore, constantly without desire, one observes its essence. Constantly with desire, one observes its manifestations. These two arise together but differ in name. Both are called the mysterious. The mystery of mysteries. The gateway to all wonders. This is the original text of the first chapter of Laozi. As you might have noticed, one key aspect here is the punctuation, which we have clearly demarcated. The first part mentions no name, wu ming, and having a name, you ming, while later it mentions without desire, wu yu, and with desire, you yu, thus forming this kind of punctuation structure. Regarding the content and phrasing, the most significant difference lies in two altered characters. In the third line, we see wu ming, wan wu zhi shi, you ming, wan wu zhi mu, where both mention all things, wan wu, but there is no reference to heaven and earth, tian di. Many versions of the Dao De Jing, particularly those influenced by the Wang Bai edition, state wu ming, 天地之始，有名，万物之母. This version, which references heaven and earth first, and then all things, is what we often see in various versions. However, Laozi in the original text does not mention heaven and earth here. To put it in more colloquial terms, the meaning of the first 3 lines is, the Tao that can be described in words is not the eternal Tao. This suggests that the Tao is indescribable. The second line reads, the name that can be named is not the eternal name, which implies that names are not fixed or permanent. The third line explains that before a name is given, it is the beginning of all things. Once a name is given, it becomes the mother of all things. These 3 lines are what we will be discussing in greater detail in this episode. First of all, why does Laozi introduce the concept of Tao and then emphasize that this Tao is indescribable? Let's consider the following. A person lives in this world for, at most, 120 years. In other words, there are over 7 billion people in the world today, but none of them existed 120 years ago, and none of them will exist 120 years from now. So, did these people truly exist? Now, let's look at the entire universe. 15 billion years ago, the universe hadn't yet appeared, and about 8 billion years from now, the universe will disappear. So, has the universe truly existed? Therefore, the length of time is not the issue. As long as something has a beginning and an end and is constantly changing, it is only temporarily existent. This means that, at its core or in its essence, it is illusory. With this realization, human beings, who have the capacity to think, will naturally begin to ask, what is the source and the ultimate destination of all this? Where do things come from, and where are they going? The origin and the destination are actually one, they are the same. Thus, the greatest and most fundamental question that humans can contemplate is the existence of all things, including humanity itself. If this existence is not a mere illusion, then there must be a source and a destination. Laozi's Taoism finds a way to resolve the nihilistic perspective on existence by offering an antidote. In other words, if we affirm that all of this is not a dream, not an illusion, then it must have a source and destination. The next question is, what is this source and destination, and what kind of insights can it provide for us? This inquiry sparks a series of reflections on life and the proper attitudes one should adopt. Thus, after pointing out that the Tao is indescribable, Laozi begins the first chapter with, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao, indicating that the Tao itself cannot be expressed in words. Then, the focus shifts back to human beings. Humans, as the most intelligent of all creatures, have the ability to think. When they begin to think, they inevitably use concepts, which are essentially names. Without names or concepts, thinking cannot occur. But here's the dilemma, the Tao cannot be an object of our thinking. As Su Dongpa's poem says, we fail to recognize the true face of Mount Lu because we are within it. The Tao encompasses everything, it is omnipresent, so we cannot treat it as a relative object to be understood or given a name. Thus, any Tao that can be articulated is not the eternal Tao. In the first line, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. It is clear that the Tao is divided into 2 forms, one is the Tao we are currently discussing, and the other is the eternal Tao itself, which cannot be spoken of. However, since humans must think, and without concepts thinking is impossible, we are compelled to discuss it. This is where the concept of name comes in. After discussing Tao, why must we talk about name? It's because humans, without the use of names or concepts, cannot engage in any thought process. All human actions, including cultural creations, begin with names. But we must view names in 2 aspects, one is the name that cannot be defined, and the other is the name that can be defined. The latter is obviously a product of convention. The name we give to something is determined by common agreement. It is not the inherent name of the thing. In other words, all names are relative. That is why Laozi says, the name that can be named is not the eternal name. Here, instead of using the word eternal, Laozi uses long-lasting because only the Tao can be considered truly eternal. Everything that humanity creates, at best, endures for a long time. In other words, when humans contemplate the origin and destination of all things, they must begin with names. All things come from the Tao, and the Tao is indescribable. What can be spoken of are merely the names humans use. In other words, any name that can be expressed is not like the indescribable Tao, which is eternal. Thus, in plain terms, the name Laozi refers to here is not a long-lasting name. How important are names? In ancient times, many other civilizations, besides the Chinese, inscribed on stone tablets the phrase dedicated to the unknown God. In other words, the God they referred to was the source and destination of all things, which originally had no name. The people did not know its name and later reluctantly gave it one. The process of naming brings us to the third line, which speaks of no name and having a name. No name refers to the time before names were established, before the appearance of humans, when all things had their origin. Having a name refers to the time after names were established by humans, which serves as the mother of all things. In this context, the words heaven and earth cannot be used because heaven and earth are also part of all things, and all things include heaven and earth. In summary, when humans see the universe and all things undergoing constant change, they naturally ask about the source and destination of everything. Whether or not this source and destination have names, or whether they can be clearly expressed, doesn't change the fact that they exist. Understanding this, we can see why many ancient civilizations shared a consensus to offer their best sacrifices to the unknown God, because this God cannot be defined by a name. Names are used because humans, possessing rationality, must use names and concepts in order to think. This is why, after discussing the Tao, Laozi immediately follows with the name that can be named is not the eternal name, then further explains the states of no name and having a name. The states before and after names are assigned representing the origin and the mother of all things. In Laozi's philosophy, name is a key concept. Human beings possess reason and must use names to define things in order to think about them. However, this can lead to other complex issues because, in addition to reason, humans also have will, which gives rise to desires. Once you understand something, you begin to desire it. This is exactly the issue of desireless and with desire that we will explain in the next episode. Finally, here's a question for you to ponder after this lesson. In ancient Egyptian mythology, when the gods created something, they only needed to say its name, and the actual thing represented by that name would come into being. The same is true in the Jewish Bible. When God created the heavens and the earth, he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. By naming things, they were brought into existence, which also illustrates Laozi's idea that having a name is the mother of all things. There are many similar examples in mythology. Humans use names to categorize individual things, grouping them into categories, a universally observable fact. On this point, consider the following: when you meet a friend, you need to remember their name. Otherwise, as the friend changes over time, they may become a vague impression in your mind. By remembering their name, you can accurately grasp who they are. Now, based on this, think about whether you have any insights or reflections on this idea.